On this episode of One Man, One Hand, and No Real Plan, it's all unhinged. So a while ago I talked about these hinges, how much I really didn't like how much they stuck out, and I keep thinking about a different way to do them. So how these hinges worked is they had the male piece was bolted to the A pillar, and then they laid over, you could see it there, the female piece, the part that went over that, is bolted right there. You can see that it's bolted to the door frame on the inside, and then it would lay over, and when you shut the door they held each other, and I didn't shut it all the way, but you can see how it held it. And then there was a pin right here that just went down and locked it all in place. So to explain what we're gonna do, I'm gonna have a hinge pocket that sits in the A frame, right? And this is where your hinge will be. And of course, it'll swing that way. If you're looking at it from the top, this is my box, and it'll have a hinge point back here. The hinge will come out like this, come over, and then attach to our, I'll draw a circle like that. That's the door, right? That sits right here. And when it hinges this way, this length right here and this length are equal, right? So when this falls down, like it turns down, then the door will be open. And I'm sorry, I'm not drawing it very good. This door will be open like this, D for door. And so then it will close and it nests in there. By making this square, that ratio of hinge will keep the door in place. And the best part is with it hinged at this point, it pivots around that. And so as it's to here, it'll pivot away. It's going to pivot away from this outside edge of the door because it'll go around that instead of into it. And so that's what we're going to try and make right now. So I have a plan in place. So I'm going to use this square tubing to make my 4 pockets to put the hinge in, and then I'm going to use this thicker stuff, and I'll cut, like this will be my U that I was talking about, and you can see that it's just a bit smaller, so that'll be perfect for that, plus a heavy stock. And so we just got to lay out and figure out how deep we can make it. And that's right at 2 inches wide stock, I imagine. Yep, it's 2 by 2. This is outside diameter 2 by 2. And this is 2 by 2 as well, just a little bit thinner walled, which will give us an extra bit of room for it to pivot. So hopefully this is 8 inches. And it's not. So I think I'm going to go ahead and mark them all at 2. I've tried a few different old sets, and I think what I'm going to do is take the original hinges. If I take the cover off the outside of it and then put a pin right there and make it work with the old mounting points, then I can pivot around like this, and now I've got exactly what I need for the door to open. It'll work perfect. So that's what we're going to work on. I need to flatten out that edge right there. So I'm going to break out my handy anvil. And a trusty hammer! Now you can see it's a lot flatter and ready to go. Yay! So to figure out my hinge location, what I need, or where I can position these things, is I need to have my hinges in a line so they can pivot around it. And so I ground that down. I'm going to clamp that in place. Then I can figure out how high I need to make this rod so I can make it shorter and clean off the end of it and make a jig to make sure they're vertically the same. They're parallel together, and then away we'll go. These hinges, you have to have your hinges in a perfect straight line. And so I made this jig to be able to hold the hinges in a perfect straight line. And then I can figure out, because the door will be right here. It sits up against this with this lip. And so I need this, the bottom one is the furthest in that it is. If you look at, I don't know that I'm even going to run the third hinge. I think I'm just going to run the bottom two. But this one's the furthest in. And so it's going to determine the placement of my middle hinge more than anything, because it's the furthest out. And even if I go all the way up here and use it, it's still the furthest, this is the furthest this way. So it's going to have to be set in the most. You can see where it was factory joined, and I need to clean all that up and then clean up all the rest from the inside and get them all the pockets prepped on the inside and outside. I'll clean them all up, and then we'll be able to have full motion with nothing inhibiting it. So that's what we'll do next. It's not the size of the sander that counts, it's the grit of the belt. And after you break all your belts, switch to your Dremel. And after the Dremel doesn't work, go medieval with the die grinder. Eventually, you end up with the rest of the pockets all being shiny. Yay! So after a significant amount of trial and error, and I don't even know how many designs, I've ended up with this, where this is the outside, my hand is the outside of the cab. And this is in the A-pillar, the pocket. And then our hinge slides in like this. And I'll set it up here so you can see it. But our hinge sits in here. And then that's closed. Door open. Closed and open. And notice that the door itself will open away from, see how my fingers are basically touching where the cab would be, but then they go away. And so it won't hit the cab, it won't hit anything, and it'll work. And I ended up making a little bit of notch to get a little more travel, and that can be modified some more, but this is the prototype. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. And I ended up using just some C-channel that I had. I think I found it in Dad's scrap pile, if you want to know the truth, off of an old implement of some kind. The inside of this is 1 3/4 inches. So I cut it a little bit. I cut it narrow on the narrow side of 1 3/4 inches to make my hinge. And it's good hefty stuff, so you should be able to carry that little bitty door. Eventually, you end up with the rest of the pockets all being shiny. Yay! And how we're gonna make this thing work is just a fun little trick. I want them to be the same. I'm gonna stack the made one, or the new one on top of the bottom one, but I'm gonna put this pin in first. So now you can see, I have to make sure it's sitting like that, but I've got them stacked and in the same orientation, and I probably just need to space that up a smidge so it's sitting right where it needs to be, so that these mimic each other and have the same build. That way, we want them to have the same build so that they work together. To get it aligned, I've got a magnet holding it on the back. I've got a clamp right here with vice grips, and then I got a C-clamp holding it down. This pin is aligning it, and I'm gonna tack it, and hopefully it'll all work. Now we'll cut the extra tang off once we're done, but for now, it's giving me something to brace against. So now that I've got the female component of the hinge in place, I just put the male hinge in, and I want this side out so I have that tang to weld with. And it's still a little hot, so, but, ouch, hot. But now we have the hinge where it needs to go. So with it in place like this, I can see that I need to cut it right about there. Now that I've got it cut, I can just tack weld it together, make sure it all works, and away we go. And as you can see, we have our articulation. Now I still need to cut that notch out so it has a little more travel. I'm gonna let that cool down, and then we can work on our other part of the hinge that we need, and that's how it mounts to the door. So it'll be a plate on this side, so like something like this, a plate on this side, and the door in between, and then we'll have the hinge on the outside. I've lost count at this point, but we found yet another snag in our plan. On the lower mount, it's all the farther I can go in before I hit the roll bar. So I think we're going to cut that off there, make it shorter, see if it works. Let's check the cut angle before we go any further. I'm hitting perfect. That's gonna be perfect. So that will be good to go. I know you can't smell that, but that smells like success to me. One of the other things we got to deal with, and you can see we cut down our pocket to be able to hit our roll bar right there and still be able to use it. But unfortunately now, deal with our hinge hitting it, and it doesn't go all the way closed. I'm going to weld in a bracket or a gusset across there and then cut that off, and that'll be my new angle for opening and closing it. So that's fully closed. I'm going to mark that spot. Now fortunately, the piece that we cut off is going to be our perfect gusset to modify our corner. Now before I weld it all up, let's just test fit. Ta-da! Now I've got the door put in place, and I'm gonna measure from this flat surface here up to the front of the door. And this is one of those situations I really wish I had a left hand. like it never happened. On this bottom hinge, one thing that I still needed to do, you can see that crack right there, and there's another crack right there that I'm going to weld up and make that solid again. But I also I've planned that, and I may not have made that clear, but I've been wanting to make those flush. So when the pockets and the hinges were bolted to the door outside of the cab, I cut a piece of A-pillar that showed me the length. So once I got the lower one in, I set this one in, and it's still not welded, it's loose. And I tacked it in one spot up here on the corner for the middle one. And what's fun is it works. The downside, well, I don't have to shut it all the way to show you. The downside is I need to move the top one in towards the center of the cab in order to get that gap closed. So I'm going to cut it out and do that again real quick. So it's in as far as I can go by moving the pocket. I think in order to close it, I'm going to have to modify the hinge just a little bit. That ought to do. After about 15 trial and errors, I ended up stepping it in right there as well. Now there's still quite a bit left to do on this pocket. I need to weld it all the way in. I need to put this A-pillar in between the two. I need to finish welding, clean up everything, and get it all put together. So the final bottom hinge looks like this, and it installs down here. That's our backing plate for inside the door, and then it'll sandwich the door. And that's how it's going to get a lot of structure to this part. Then you just bolt it up. I've got the lower pocket welded in. I've got the A-pillar put in. I've got the upper pocket welded in. And I primed it with some weld-through primer just to throw something on it. And it's not super cleaned up yet, but it's enough that everything functions and whatnot. I haven't decided how I'm going to finish off the trim right in there. Most likely this will all be covered except for the pockets themselves. But we'll see. The whole point is I have no plan. If you've enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button. If you like what we're doing on this channel, feel free to subscribe. And until next time, I'll keep screwing stuff up.